Hello and welcome to this tutorial on drum replacement in Bitwig Studio, actually version 3.03. I already did this video in German, but since some of you requested an English version, here we are. First of all, why drum replacement in Bitwig? Since Bitwig is my main DAW I work with, and I'm running it on a Linux-based system, there are only few alternatives, but most of them doesn't match my workflow and my user experience in 2019. So, and the other thing is, I wanted to see if I can come up with something cool when working with more classical recordings in a more electronic based DAW. So here we are. So as you already can see, I've loaded up a session and I will give you a short listen so you know what the raw tracks sound like. So they are not totally bad, but could be better. And yeah, it's kind of, it's okay. It's workable. And you could try to improve, let's say, the kick drum with something more standard, like you would choose a gate and an EQ, and I've made myself a preset. So I could cut down on fiddling with different stuff. So I've got a gate here, which I added two filters to cut down the frequency the gate is listening to. And I've added an EQ to the sidechain function of the gate to alter the sound to my likings. And I'm just copying the EQ to the end of the chain. Oh, yeah, there you go. To show you that it's really not a different sound if you put the EQ into the sidechain path or not, or at the end of the chain. So we will have a short listen to this, and I will solo the kick drum for that example. So first, EQ on in the sidechain. And now with the EQ at the end activated. The front, and EQ in the back. So you could be totally fine with that. And as you see, it's no difference if you have the EQ in the sidechain path or at the end. The result is the same, and it's just personal preference that I like to create these chains to include all the stuff inside there and have a pretty clean channel if I collapse all the things together. And the result we have using this method is pretty okay. But it could be better. And to be honest, from today's modern rock, pop, worship, folk, whatever songs, you and we are mostly used to this totally punchy, cracking drums where the kick hits hard, the snare hits harder, and you have this whole energy and attack. And sometimes you cannot get that out of the source sample. So as you noticed, if I bypass the gate and we listen back to the original track, that sounds like this. Activating the gate in the EQ makes it a lot better, and probably in the context of the mix, the little background noise does not matter. But to enhance the sound of your drums even more, you can go one step further. So therefore we will deactivate the gate and the EQ and go to the browser, and under presets I have something set up that is called drum replacement, and there I have another chain which is called trigger multi-sample to live, and there I have different settings for different scenarios like kick, snare, tom 1, tom 2, and even tom 3, which is not listed right now. So this is basically another chain, including a replacer, generator within a sampler, effect slots, and an EQ. But let's go one step back. Before I'm gonna show you this, Bitwig offers another nice tool. That's the replacer itself. So we are opening the browser again. You can do this by tapping B or just hit the plus button and search for replacer, and there you have it. So, and the replacer is a great tool to have live audio or an audio signal at least triggering a sample, a MIDI file, or whatever. So you got this replacer where you got to set a threshold for when the replacer should act, and something like the hold time, how long it should hold on to the peak, and you can set up in the more upper middle a section where you can choose a specific frequency range, like we did in the gate here, first example. So that's pretty similar to what you would use normally, but you can with this little button you can listen to the frequency you selected. For a kick drum I would probably go around 30 to 40 hertz, and then open the generator slot, and since we want to trigger samples, I would load up the sampler, Bitwig's default sampler, and then go to multi-sample. And yeah, like I said before, we wanted to have a kick drum, so I'm looking for a kick sound, and I know this Revolution kick close sound from Mike Indovina sounds pretty dope, so we will take this one. And now if we lower the threshold like 20 and would play back the whole thing, you would notice the original sound is replaced in total. So let's try that. And since we have the threshold too high, you can see we missed some of our trigger points, so we will lower that, and now we get all of our hits. Maybe some missed triggers from other sources like snare too. So you gotta play around a little bit, and we could shorten the whole time since the kick transient is such a short thing, and this gives us the least amount of miss trigger. So without samples, with samples. As you already noticed, the sampler is just triggering the highest sample, and that's due to our velocity setting here at the beginning. Velocity is set to 100% and therefore triggers the hardest or the highest value kick sample we have. If we decrease that, let's do this for a short time, hit playback and decrease, you can already hear and see that we launch and trigger more of the mids of our samples, and the output has already decreased, as you notice. So that's one way to do it. The problem with this is if we would print the whole track like this, we will get a pretty static new kick track, which is consistent throughout the whole song, which is nice, but lacks the dynamic we all like and want from our original source. And that's where I started to ask some people on Facebook, on a Facebook group, hey guys, how can I achieve that the sampler and the replacer will retain my original dynamics? And yeah, let's have a look at what I came up with, thanks to the help of the other people. So basically we have another replacer here in front, and the threshold is set, the hold times are set, and even the frequency range our replacer is listening to is pretty equal to what I said before. You see the velocity range is down to 38.5%, which is pretty low, you might wonder. And of course we got our sampler loaded up with the exact same multi-sample, and I've added some EQs afterwards and in the effects slot to tune the sample to taste. But the EQs are not that important in this part. As I have shown you before, if we set the velocity down to 38%, we will only have our lowest samples triggered. And to avoid this, somebody told me to maybe go and try an envelope follower at the very beginning of the replacer to modify my velocity settings based on the envelope of the incoming signal. So as you can see, I've opened up the modulator slot, opened the envelope follower, and you can see all my settings. So first off, you can see gain, and I've increased the input, or better to say the incoming signal, by 4.8 dB to trigger the right amount of samples. So most times I have triggered the mids of the samples or the upper mids, and I've set it to peak mode to detect the envelope. I've tried RMS, but that does not work so well since we are most times getting short transients to work with, so peak works best. Furthermore, I set a pretty fast attack time by 3.2 milliseconds, and a pretty short release time by 17.8 milliseconds. If you increase the release time too much, you will have this it will just increase the tail of your snare hits. So if the original kick is running out of energy, it will just pump it up at the end. So that sounds unnatural. So you have to dial in settings which fit your source you want to replace. And last but not least, we have the amount the envelope follower is working at the bottom, and it's set to 70%, which works best. I tried more, I tried less, but 70%, 65 to 70% works best to remain the human feel and the natural vibe of a drum you would expect to sound like. Yeah. And for all of you guys who've been working with Bitwig for a while, you know this modulation arrow. So if we click on that, all of the parts inside the chain will, which can be modulated, will turn blue, and the modulated ones will turn up in a lighter blue. As you can see, I've increased based on the envelope the velocity of the replacer by around 75%, but I also modulated the output based on the incoming signal. So every stronger hit will result in a stronger output signal at the end of my sampler. And one of the first thing folks from Bitwig, from the Bitwig Facebook group, recommend me to try is modify the velocity sensitivity. So what this basically does is it softens the attack on quieter signals. So if I get a pretty quiet signal, it will soften the attack on the lowest sample to make it even smoother and more appealing. And if you got a stronger hit, it's not softening that attack so much. And this results in a pretty great sound, at least to me. So if we go to our kick track and increase the size, so we can see the dynamics a little better. Sorry, misspelling. And we will switch between the default replacer and the modified version. You will start to notice that there's a difference. So let's just try the default replacer with the same sample. Okay, I've gotten rid of the EQs at the end of the chain, but that is just a difference in tone, but not in the overall volume so much. So therefore, let's have a listen. So I'm increasing the output, but as you can hear, the difference is it's not really there, right? So this sounds super boring because it lacks all the dynamics we wanted to have. Now let's switch on the new one. And you can already tell these little nuances we now get, hitting a little stronger, hitting a little weaker. You can already tell that this is in the signal even when using samples, and therefore will give us a more natural feel when we listen to the overall product in terms of the song. So that's it for the kick drum, and you guessed it, I already did that for a snare track as well. So I will leave that on here, but we will switch to our snare track, which is pretty dynamic, not too dynamic, but yeah, it's okay. And we will load up another preset I made, and this is also a chain. The replacer is the same. I got a multi-sample which I created myself, loaded up, got some EQs on the effects slot, and a transient controller in the tool. So the transient control I mainly use to add more attack to the overall snare sound. So settings are pretty much the same, especially when we are looking at the velocity value in the replacer. I can switch back to the kick drum settings we had. So you can see that's exactly the same. They're both 38%, 0.5%, but I changed obviously the frequency range the replacer will listen to, since the snare sound is a lot different than the kick sound. So threshold is pretty low to get most of the transients from the snare to have a signal that's close to the original one when we are done sampling. One thing you noticed, I've decreased the hold time on the snare when you compare it to the kick drum here. That's because some of the snare rolls and hits are just so quick that I had to reduce the hold time in order to get every single hit. So, but the main magic on the snare replacement is happening in front of here. I've already have, like you guessed it, 2 envelope followers. The first one is pretty much doing the same like I mentioned before. So if we click the little arrow, we will have our velocity modified by 75%, I guess, and our output and our sensitivity. And I had to increase the gain a little bit more than on the kick drum, since the snare drum the original track is not that dynamic, and I wanted to make sure that I get all the peaks and hits I need in order to trigger my samples right. So let's take a look at the second envelope follower. You guessed it. This time I've already increased the gain by 18 dB, so it gets every single hit. Why? Let's check this little blue arrow, and you may notice I haven't modulated anything with that inside the replacer itself, nor the sampler, nor the transient control. It only is modulating the tool, and there it's modulating the panning. So my goal was to emulate the different spots the drummer would normally hit on a snare head. Just a little and a tiny little detail, but I thought it would be nice especially in softer music, to have these little nuances. And yeah, as you can see, I have pretty short attack and release times on the second one, because I just want these short hits to modulate the panning just real quick, and therefore I increase the amount to 100%, because I don't want to miss a single hit here, and it's given me the best results. Therefore you can mess around with it, but yeah, that's just my experience. And yeah, the values from the first envelope follower, how much you have to modulate the output and the sensitivity of the velocity, that's just, yeah, trial and error. There's no rule of thumb. Go and check it out. At least that sounded good to me. So without further ado, I would invite you to give that a listen. So we will check out kick and snare, both solo and then in context with the overall kit and the mix. So here we go. Yeah, let's increase the snare a little bit. And now let's flip it back into the context of the mix and see how it works. So bring down the overheads a little bit and increase the bass and the metronome. Obviously, the guy who handed over the bass track to me added the metronome to have a guide track, kind of, but that's okay. And as you can tell, this sounds way better, and I'm gonna switch over and we will have a listen again, and I will deactivate both the drum replacement on the snare and the kick. So this is what it sounds before, totally untreated. And this is with our drum replacement engaged. And you can already tell this sounds so much better. And of course, I have a drum replacement set up, special chains for tom, for all the rec toms or for the floor tom. The only thing I wouldn't recommend doing so is on hi-hat and overheads. Sometimes I find it easier, especially on overheads, to place cymbal hits by hand, especially when the drummer is not hitting the cymbals all the time, just sparkly. And then I would go down the rabbit hole and place all the cymbal hits by hand, because that's way faster and you have to worry a lot less about miss, trigger and stuff like that. So that's what I would do. So that's it, guys, for now. As you can see, it is possible to do drum replacement in a more electronic dance music featured DAW like Bitwig. And you can see the results are pretty good, I guess, and you can enhance your drum sound pretty quick to the next level. Yeah, that's it for now. If you like the video, leave a comment below, and yeah, make sure to subscribe for more videos to come.